Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It is Monday, October 21st, and today I'm going to take a look at a few astrological transits that are happening in the next few days and get you ready for them. All right, so I'm going to put the chart up on the screen, and we're going to talk, for starters, about the upcoming square between the planet Mars in the sign of Libra, which you can see right here. I have this in Placidus at the moment, and moving into a square with Saturn in Capricorn. So that transit is happening pretty soon. I'll give you the timing of it. Whenever a planet moves to within 3 degrees of making an aspect, a way of thinking about it is that within those 3 degrees, it is as though the two planets making the aspect are starting to create the shape that the aspect refers to within the circle, and that shape is starting to light up in the wheel. So for example, just give you a quick view. When we talk about a square, what we're actually talking about is about a 90-degree angle that is one side of a 4-sided square. All right, so we come down and eventually we make a little square like that. We go from Capricorn over to Aries, Aries over to Cancer, Cancer back over to Libra. We have a square. So when ancient astrologers use the word square, is making a square, what they were really saying is that by means of the shape of the square within the circle, or the triangle in the case of a trine, for example, these two planets are beholding one another. They're witnessing one another. Okay. So whenever we say a planet is making this aspect or that aspect, whatever, a lot of the times it just sounds like abstract mathematical jargon. Really what we're trying to do is get into a kind of sacred geometry that is appearing in the chart that the planets are participating in. That geometry is always there because it's made by virtue of the signs. The whole signs, one to another, have lines of sight to each other. And when a planet hits another planet by aspect, what you're seeing is that specific shape within the circle of the zodiac, made between a variety of signs, starting to appear because a planet takes part in one of the sides or one of the angular configurations that creates a side within that shape. So it helps me when I think Mars is hitting the square to Saturn, that really what's happening is they're starting to participate in this kind of sacred shape that's inherent in the zodiac. It helps to think of it that way because then if you know what the nature of that shape is, you start to understand what the nature of the relationship between the two planets is. For example, in ancient astrology, squares are of the nature of Mars. And there's a kind of sophisticated reason for this. But so now I'm saying, oh, they're coming together in the shape of a square, which means they're going to have some degree of conflict between the two of them. Now, what could that conflict entail when it comes to Mars and Saturn? Well, let's just forget their signs for a second and just say Mars and Saturn in general. So Saturn is the planet that has so much to do with, in one sense, negativity, but not just negativity in a bad sense, negativity in a really holistic sense. For example, doubt or skepticism can play a really important role in our lives. Ancient astrology, that's Saturn. Anything that withholds and we say no to, that could be Saturn. So Saturn is a conservative sort of negative function, but not really understood by ancient astrologers to be inherently good or bad. Remember, the ancient astrologers are looking at everything as though it's transcendental. It's both good and bad. It's beyond good and bad. But functionally speaking, in our world, Saturn often represents stuff that we don't like, right? Like a lot of us don't like the word no, don't like limit. We don't like austerity. We don't like having to show discipline in some area of our life. But more generally speaking, Saturn can represent the more cool or cold, detached, objective perspective, which can be very helpful. It can also represent seriousness, sobriety, wisdom, maturity, the wisdom of a grandmother, grandparent. So you're thinking about Saturn as aged, has perspective, has distance, has time accompanying it. So that's Saturn doing his thing in Capricorn, which is one of his home signs. Very comfortable there, very practical Saturn there. And then here comes Mars, Mars is a planet that represents severing and cutting. Mars represents contention. Mars is the will. Mars is competition. Mars is drive and courage and force and vigor and muscle. So when Mars comes into the square with Saturn, it's like the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. Frustration can result. On the other hand, one of the other simple archetypes that can show up with Mars and Saturn is concerted, disciplined efforts. Effort, Mars, discipline, Saturn. So think about disciplined efforts or frustration of will, limitation of power and will, meeting with a roadblock. The other thing it can refer to is someone who has a cold or icy authoritative way of demonstrating power or force, Mars, Saturn. A person or maybe a quality within us or a situation, right? The other thing that this can refer to is literally, like, for example, the elimination or cutting of a limb. This can get very bodily, where if Saturn is structure and Mars is the knife, then we're talking about cutting things away from a structure, from an existing structure. So sometimes the Mars-Saturn dynamic will be, you could think of it like someone carving a block of wood. They chip away at it in order to carve a shape. Sometimes it's defining something through some kind of cutting or severing, defining a relationship through cutting something out, defining your responsibilities by cutting out things that are frivolous. So you also think about cutting and simplifying or reducing things, tightening things up, and sometimes trying to force things too. You have to be careful of that. So this energy is perfecting over the course of the next few days. Let's see how long it takes this to perfect. So when it hits the 3-degree mark, you're in business, which is where we are right now. And then we get to about 15 degrees by October 27th. So that's like a full week that we have of watching this transit from Mars to Saturn apply. And then, right after that, Mars goes where? To Pluto. And so that transit we're going to visit later. But for today, we're just looking at Mars, Saturn. You don't have to say, for most people who follow astrology a little bit, that everybody knows that Saturn is coming into a huge conjunction with Pluto, and we'll be spending plenty of time talking about that. And again, I'll follow up with Mars, Pluto later, but it's actually going right from Saturn to Pluto. But for now, in the week ahead, you can think about these themes that I've just mentioned with Mars hitting the square to Saturn. So that's a simple transit that's coming soon. The other transit that's coming, which I'm going to be doing a separate video about as well, is the entrance of the sun into Scorpio, which is happening over the course of like the next 2 to 3 days. So as that happens, though, the sun is going through the 29th degree of Libra. Now, I'll just give you a hint that this is happening on October 22nd, tomorrow. So you want to be careful about the anaretic degrees. Whenever a planet's culminating at the last degree of a sign, it is typically in what are known as the bounds of the malefics, which means Saturn and Mars has ownership over certain degrees in every single sign of the zodiac. The very last degrees of a sign, every sign has 30 degrees, typically belong to Mars or Saturn. And so you're always thinking about that in as a way of understanding these the anaretic degree. So in Libra, for example, the last degrees of Libra, I just checked to make sure I wasn't wrong about that, are in the bound of Mars. So this is a sun in Libra already in its fall that is now going to be in the bound of Mars. So you want to be careful in the next 24 hours, even to 48 hours. Sun is about to go into the sign of Mars, and it is in the bound of Mars in the next day. So a little bit of a Mars undercurrent, and when the sun is in Libra and it's in its fall, it's a little like, just watch out for that passive aggression, or watch out for those issues around fairness and justice and truth and balance and things like that. It's an easy time to get in a fight where you really feel like something big is at stake, a moral, a principle, a value, or a belief, but you may not be equipped. You may be running into, a battle with people who really aren't there to fight you. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we do this to each other too in our relationships, right? So that's happening. We go into tomorrow when the sun is at this 29th degree right here. So you want to watch for that. Um, so those are a few of the big transits happening. I can't help but notice another one that's happening right now today. Trines are sometimes a little sneakier, but there is a Venus Neptune trine right now, right? Both in water signs. An interesting thing to note is that in the Indian tradition of astrology, water was related to the northerly direction, and the northerly direction was related to moksha. It's the direction that we find the pole star, that unchanging luminous center around which everything else in the sky, all the stars, appear to rotate. Um, the water is associated with liberation, with the inner search for meaning, with contemplation, inner reflection, and sometimes with solitude, with moodiness. It's an interesting moment where Venus trine Neptune, for example, in that state of inner kind of searching or probing and moodiness, with the connection to Neptune, something imaginative, romantic, spiritual may take hold right now and could have a lot of power. I mean, for example, this is the kind of moment where you might see a dark drama that really speaks to you or you find really beautiful, like a movie or something like that. It could be a time to make a piece of art that's a little darker, but authentic. It has that feeling of sensual, imaginative, a little bit broody, and maybe a little indulgent too, which is not always a bad thing. But just be careful, because this is the time where you could, like, I don't know, you could end up binge watching one of these horror shows like on Netflix or something. And because you're feeling kind of heavy and broody, and it could like disturb your mind quite a bit. Remember, Mercury's still in Scorpio. On the other hand, Mercury's trying to Neptune can be one of those moments where within the context of love, of friendships, of art, of relationship, of sexuality, something transcendent is available. Something spirit oriented can take place. So watch for that. I really like that one. The other thing is, of course, deception in relationships, jealousy, all of the kind of drama that Venus in Mars's sign can sometimes bring up, because Venus in Mars's sign, is conflicted, like war and peace, love and conflict are kind of conflicted, and in a deeper, more intense emotional sign. And so when we see that, plus the smooth connection to Neptune and Jupiter's sign of Pisces, you just get this feeling of like, okay, like things could be seductive and conflicted, kind of edgy and beautiful, but also maybe a little dangerous. So you want to be careful of that allure of this transit, with the potential for conflict with Venus there. But also you think about the ability for harmony to come in unexpected and kind of mysterious ways, or for there to be, something a little exotic, foreign, and deep coming through to speak to you, something that is artistic, again, something imaginative, romantic, with friends. So at any rate, a little bit of Venus Neptune today that you can check out, the Venus trine to Neptune. I want to back up a second for people. If you remember that I gave a talk on Pluto's sun's square to Pluto, and it was kind of a meditation on Hades and Pluto and so forth. And I did some other talks about that Sun-Pluto square. And one of the things I said was you could see real conflict or challenges, even death sometimes, coming for heads of state or people who are considered leaders or in the spotlight in some way. And I just want to add, because sometimes it's really unique to, sometimes I feel like I don't do enough to report back to you guys and be like, did you see this or that in, kind of the world events that confirm that thing we were just talking about? Because sometimes it's really a good practice to try and just observe how those transits played out in the world, so that you're not like, you're not having to pinch yourself all the time with astrology. Like, is this real? Is this real? Yeah, it's real. It's totally real. When Sun squared Pluto, not only were there a lot of things going on with heads of state in the world that were really complicated and actually involved with war and conflict with the whole Syria-Turkey thing. But another thing, really interesting thing that happens was I live in Maryland, so my Baltimore representative Elijah Cummings, senator, congressman, I can't remember which, he just passed away. So he died. I think he was like 70, 68, something like that. He wasn't super old, and he just passed away, Sun Square Pluto. So that death of the prominent, social justice, civil rights activist, so a loss. I think that, I remember growing up when, there was a time even in my young lifetime when any, someone who served their country in any capacity passed away, it was a moment to be thankful. Like now it feels like, when someone dies, everyone's like rooting, like someone evil just got wiped out that they don't like, or you know what I mean? And I feel like, why do people, I don't know, why do we do that? It's too bad. At any rate, I won't wax poetic about that too long. But so the other thing that's coming that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of days is, not only does the sun cross into Scorpio imminently, but the sun is also there's going to be a new moon. Check this out. I'm just going to give you a preview of this. Here's the new moon coming together in Scorpio, and better believe it's exactly opposite Uranus. Next month's new moon is going to be crazy, just in terms of the radical amount of stuff going on. Because if you don't think that's enough, right after the new moon with Uranus, a couple days later, Mercury stations and turns retrograde after a conjunction with Venus again. Just a screwy end to October with that Uranus new moon. It should be really interesting. So we'll come back to that and talk more about that later. In the meantime, I want to finally pump my upcoming program a few more times here. I'm going to be featuring an interview with one of my students who's also got a really cool YouTube channel. And that'll be coming up, so you can learn more about her. And we're going to talk about introversion, creativity, and astrology. And she'll talk to you about what her experience has been like in my program. But more generally, the program starts on November 16th. It's a one-year course called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is a course in ancient Greco-Roman Hellenistic astrology, has a lot in common with ancient Indian astrology. If you've enjoyed the way that I fuse concepts and synthesize things together on my channel, you'll really love this class. It's a year-long, 30 classes, 2 to 3 hours each. You can participate remotely and watch the videos at your own pace, or you can come live to the webinars each week. There's a classroom forum discussion group, optional reading throughout the year, optional quizzes, all sorts of stuff, exercises that we do together as a group, tons of bonus material. Plus there's 12 guest professional astrologers that come into our classroom and teach throughout the year, in addition to the 30 lectures. So at the end, people can take a certification exam if you want to get a certification from me personally. That's one of the main ways that astrological apprenticeship is done these days. You take a class with someone who you really respect, whose methods you really respect, and who has a good, professional resume. And that's kind of the way, because there's no like regulating body, but there's many like organizations here or there, but there's sort of many different ways to go about getting an astrological education. So in this class, though, if you have the intention to read for other people and you really want to set a strong foundation, you've been studying on your own, you've been reading what you can, but it feels like it's hard to parse through it all on your own, right? So this course is really good for that. It's a very structured course. There's a lot of references and support there for you. You can email me throughout the year to ask questions about what you're learning. And at the end of the course, for like the last 8-9 sessions on the year, you get to see me working with live clients. And then after the live clients go, we break down the reading together so that you can really see how the theory and the spiritual philosophy that we study throughout the year is applied with real people to, try to help people. So if you are interested in that, the early bird rate lasts for only 10 more days. The early bird rate helps you to save about $500 on the program. that is available until October 1st. It's $12.99 if you pay up front for the whole year. It's $1,800 spread out over 12 months if you need a payment plan. If you are someone who really wants to take the course, but you are retired and on a limited income, a veteran, someone who has a disability, a full-time student, a single parent, someone who has a really limited budget, and the cost is just too high for you. If you're someone like that, I also have need-based tuition. The spots are limited. They're first come, first serve. They're almost done, but you could still get in on that if you wanted to. You just email me and tell me about your situation at nightlightastrology@gmail.com. You can check all of this out on the certification course tab on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And the last thing I'll say is that for those of you who are thinking about studying with me and you're thinking, well, I hope there's another opportunity, I offer these courses every year, right? So there will be, a next time for sure. But at the same time, I always tell people, if you're feeling called to study and you're really passionate about astrology, don't keep putting it off, because it's a life changer. It's literally bringing the heavens into your vocabulary, into your speech, into your mind, into your thoughts. That's purifying, and it helps you to get to that place that most people are trying to get, which is the interior love of our own hearts and connection to our source. Astrology is deeply helpful in just helping us get into our center. Many people in the course take it specifically because they love astrology. They want to deepen their knowledge. They don't know what they're going to do with it necessarily. In this sense, astrology is, it's an ally that we have to learn this language to help us understand the different karmic seasons of life and to have a language that helps us to love and be ready for all of it. So that's what I've got for you guys for today. I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a beautiful week, and we'll be back soon with more as the sun is about to enter Scorpio. Take care, everyone. Bye.